The massive ships appeared at the edge of the solar system like dark mountains floating in space. Each one was bigger than Earth's moon, their black hulls covered in strange lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. There were 12 of them, and they moved with the slow confidence of predators who knew their prey could not escape. Admiral Vexithara stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Doombringer. He was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished metal. His red eyes studied the small blue planet that hung in the distance like a jewel. This was Earth, home to the creatures called humans. Soon it would belong to the Kitharan Empire, just like 17 other worlds before it. "Send the message," Vexithara commanded. His voice was deep and cold, like winter wind through empty caves. The communication beam shot across space faster than light. On Earth, every radio, television, and computer screen suddenly went dark. Then a new image appeared, the face of Admiral Vexithara, his red eyes burning with ancient authority. "Humans of Earth," he began, his words reaching every person on the planet at the same time. "I am Admiral Vexithara of the Kitharan Empire. We have conquered 17 star systems. Your world is next. You have 72 of your hours to surrender. Completely. If you refuse, we will destroy every living thing on your planet. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The screen went black. In Washington, President Chen sat in the Situation Room, her face pale as winter snow. Around the long table, generals and advisors stared at each other with the look of people who had just learned they were going to die. The Secretary of Defense cleared his throat and spoke the words everyone was thinking. "Our entire fleet has 300 ships, mostly old cruisers and destroyers. Against 12 of those things." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. President Chen closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she looked like she had aged 10 years. "Get me the UN Secretary General. We need to call an emergency meeting and contact every world leader. If we're going to die, we'll face it together." But deep under the mountains of Colorado, in a place that didn't exist on any map, Admiral Sarah Reeves read a different kind of message. It was short, just a few words on a screen that would delete itself in 10 seconds. "Project Lazarus is active. All assets deploy in 68 hours. God help us all." Sarah Reeves was 50 years old, with gray hair and scars on her hands from years of working on machines that officially didn't exist. She had been waiting for this message for 20 years. She hoped it would never come, but she had prepared. For this day, every single moment since she joined the project, she picked up a phone that connected to numbers no one else knew existed. "This is Reeves. Lazarus is active. Wake up the fleet." On the other end of each call, people who lived normal lives, teachers, farmers, mechanics, heard the words they had trained to hear. Within minutes, they began to disappear. Their families were told they had been called away on urgent business. No one asked questions. They had been trained not to ask questions. Meanwhile, the Kitharan fleet settled into position around Earth's solar system like a noose tightening around a neck. Admiral Vexithara allowed his officers to place bets on how long the humans would last. Most thought they would surrender within the first day. Some believed it might take 2 days before fear broke their spirits completely. "Humans are weak," said Commander Ziktar, Vexithara's second-in-command. "We have seen their ships, metal tubes with chemical rockets. They are like children playing with sticks while we carry weapons that can crack planets." Vexithara nodded, but he kept watching the blue planet. He had conquered many worlds, and he knew the pattern. First came the panic, then the desperate attempts to negotiate. Then the fear would spread like a disease until whole populations begged for mercy. Finally, surrender. It always ended the same way. On Earth, the panic had indeed begun. Cities around the world saw people rushing to stores buying food and water as if they could hide from weapons that could destroy continents. Governments held emergency meetings that accomplished nothing except to confirm what everyone already knew. They were helpless. President Chen spoke to the world from the Oval Office. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed the truth. My fellow humans, we face a threat unlike anything in our history. Our military leaders are exploring every option. We will not give up hope. We will not surrender our freedom without a fight, no matter how impossible the odds. But even as she spoke these brave words, she knew they were lies. Earth's weapons were toys compared to what waited in space. Their most powerful nuclear missiles might scratch the paint on one of those alien ships. The math was simple and terrible. Humanity was about to become extinct. Far from Earth, beyond the orbit of Neptune where no human ship was supposed to exist, something moved in the darkness. It was a ship, but not like any ship in Earth's official Navy. It was black as the space around it, and it seemed to bend light so that eyes could not focus on its shape properly. On its bridge, a woman with captain's stripes watched displays that showed information no Earth government knew existed. "Ma'am," said her communications officer, "we're receiving the activation signal from Admiral Reeves." Captain Maria Santos had been waiting in this cold, empty part of space for 3 months. Her ship, the Wraith, was one of many that existed in the shadows between truth and lies. For 20 years, while the world's attention was focused on the small, weak fleet that everyone could see, other ships had been built in secret. Ships with technology that would seem impossible to anyone who saw it. "Signal received and confirmed," Santos replied. "Begin awakening sequence for the entire Shadow Fleet. It's time to show these aliens what humans can really do." Around her ship, the darkness began to stir. One by one, like giants waking from a long sleep, more ships appeared. They had been there all along, hidden by technology that bent light and fooled sensors. Each one was a secret that had been kept for decades, a surprise that was about to change everything. The Kithaeron fleet continued their slow approach to Earth, confident in their power and certain of their victory. They had done this many times before. They knew how the story would end, but they did not know about the shadows that were gathering at the edges of the system, or the woman named Sarah Reeves who had spent her life preparing for this moment. As the 72-hour deadline began to count down, two forces moved toward the same point in space. One came in the light, proud and certain of victory. The other moved in darkness, carrying secrets that would soon become the galaxy's worst nightmare. The humans appeared to be preparing for surrender. White flags began appearing on government buildings. Military bases went quiet. The alien invaders smiled with satisfaction, knowing they had won another easy victory. They had no idea how wrong they were. The white flags hung from every government building on Earth like funeral shrouds. In cities around the world, people watched their leaders prepare for surrender with the hollow eyes of the defeated. The 72-hour deadline was almost over, and humanity appeared to have chosen life as slaves over death as free people. President Chen stood in the Oval Office, adjusting her black dress for what the world believed would be her final speech as leader of a free Earth. Her hands shook slightly as she smoothed the fabric, but her voice would not shake when the time came. She had been practicing this performance for 20 years. "My fellow humans," she began, looking directly into the camera, with eyes that showed perfect, calculated despair. "After consulting with world leaders and our military advisors, we have concluded that resistance would only result in the complete destruction of our species. Therefore, in the interest of preserving human life, Earth formally accepts the terms of surrender offered by the Kithaeron Empire." Around the world, people wept. Children asked their parents why the adults had given up. But in certain secret places, other people smiled grimly and made final preparations for the real war that was about to begin. Admiral Vexithera received Earth's surrender from his flagship with the satisfaction of a hunter who had cornered his prey exactly as planned. The message had been broadcast on all human communication networks, and his computers confirmed it was genuine. The leaders of Earth were preparing to meet him in orbit, to sign the formal documents that would make their world property of the Empire. "Predictable," Vexithara said to his officers. "Humans value their individual lives more than their freedom. It makes them weak, but it also makes conquest simple." He ordered his fleet to move closer to Earth, positioning his ships in a formation that would allow him to destroy any city on the planet within minutes, if the surrender proved to be a trick. But the Kithaeron admiral did not know about the conversation. happening in a room that existed 5 miles below the Colorado mountains, behind walls of steel and concrete thick enough to survive a nuclear war. Admiral Sarah Reeves stood before a wall of screens that showed information the surface world had never seen. Each screen displayed the location and status of ships that did not appear in any official records. The Shadow Armada was spread throughout the solar system like a net made of invisible steel, waiting for the moment when they would reveal themselves. Final status report, Reeves commanded. All 500 Shadow units are in position and fully operational, reported her communications officer. Stealth systems at maximum efficiency. Enemy sensors show no indication they have detected our presence. Reeves nodded. For 20 years she had prepared for this day. While the world above built a small, weak navy that everyone could see, the Shadow Project had constructed something entirely different. Ships that could become invisible, weapons that could tear apart matter at the atomic level, technology that the aliens would not understand until it was too late. Dr. Vasquez, Reeves said, turning to a woman with tired eyes and gray hair who had spent decades making impossible things possible. Are your systems ready? Dr. Elena Vasquez had been the chief scientist for Project Lazarus since its beginning. She had invented the technology that could hide entire fleets from any sensor ever built. She had designed weapons that worked by changing the laws of physics in small areas of space. And she had done it all while the world believed she was just another researcher studying theoretical mathematics. The stealth field generators are operating at 100% efficiency, Vasquez replied. The alien sensors cannot detect us even when we're right next to them, and our weapon systems. She smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. Let's just say they're going to be very surprised. Meanwhile, on the surface, the surrender ceremony was being prepared. Earth's leaders gathered in orbit aboard the International Space Station, which had been hastily expanded to accommodate the meeting. They looked like people attending their own funeral, which in a way they were. The old Earth was about to die, so that the real Earth could be born. President Chen floated in the meeting chamber, wearing the same black dress she had worn for her surrender speech. Around her, other world leaders maintained expressions of defeat and despair. They were all excellent actors, and they were performing the most important roles of their lives. Admiral Vexithara's personal shuttle docked with the station exactly, on schedule. The alien admiral was tall and imposing, his forearms moving with mechanical precision as he entered the chamber. His red eyes showed no mercy, no kindness, only the cold satisfaction of complete victory. I am Admiral Vexithara, he announced, his voice filling the chamber with the sound of absolute authority. You have chosen wisely. Surrender will save your species from extinction. You will be allowed to live, to work, to serve the Empire. Your children will know peace under our rule. President Chen bowed her head in what appeared to be submission. We thank you for your mercy, Admiral. Earth surrenders completely and unconditionally. But even as these words were spoken, other conversations were happening on frequencies the aliens could not hear. Deep in space, Captain Maria Santos made final checks on her ship's weapon systems. The Wraith hung in the darkness beyond Mars, invisible to every sensor the Kitharan fleet possessed. All Shadow units, this is Santos, she broadcast on the secret network that connected the hidden fleet. Final weapons check. We get one chance to do this right. Across the solar system, 500 ships that did not officially exist prepared for battle. Each one was a masterpiece of human engineering and human rage. They had been built by people who refused to accept that humanity was weak. They had been designed by scientists who understood that sometimes survival required becoming something your enemies could not imagine. Captain Yuki Tanaka floated in the cockpit of her fighter, the Phantom. It was smaller than the other shadow ships, but it carried technology that could do impossible things. Her fighter could phase in and out of normal space, appearing inside enemy ships before they knew she was there. She had trained for this moment for 15 years, and she was ready to show the aliens what human creativity could accomplish. This is Tanaka, all systems green, ready to demonstrate some Earth hospitality. The surrender ceremony continued in orbit. Admiral Vexithara produced a device that would formally transfer control of Earth to the Kitharan Empire. All President Chen had to do was place her hand on the scanner, and humanity would officially become slaves. She reached toward the device with a hand that appeared to tremble with fear. But the trembling was not fear, it was anticipation. Because at that exact moment, Admiral Reeves was giving the order that would change everything. All shadow units, Reeves commanded from her underground fortress. This is Lazarus Control. Operation Revelation is now active. Decloak and engage. Show them what we really are. President Chen's hand stopped just short of the scanner. She looked up at Admiral Vexithera with eyes that no longer showed defeat. Instead, they burned with something the alien had never seen in the eyes of conquered people. Triumph. Admiral, she said, her voice suddenly strong and clear. I'm afraid there's been a change of plans. In space around Earth, 500 ships that had been invisible suddenly became visible. They appeared from nothing like ghosts becoming solid, their black hulls seeming to absorb the light of the sun. They were everywhere, above, below, and around the Kitharan fleet in a formation that turned the aliens from hunters into prey. Admiral Vexithara's red eyes widened in shock and disbelief. His sensors, which had shown empty space moments before, now displayed more ships than his entire fleet. Ships that appeared to be using technology his empire had never encountered. Impossible, he whispered. President Chen smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had just revealed the perfect surprise. Admiral Vexthara, meet the real human space navy. I think you're going to find we're not quite as primitive as you believed. The moment Admiral Vexthara saw the human ships appear from nothing, he knew his empire had made a terrible mistake. The vessels that materialized around his fleet were unlike anything in the Kitharan database. They were sleek and dark, their hulls seeming to drink in starlight rather than reflect it. Worse, there were 500 of them against his 12 dreadnoughts. Impossible readings, Commander Ziktar reported from his station, his four hands working frantically over alien controls. Sir, these ships, their power signatures are beyond our sensors' ability to measure accurately. The smallest human vessel is generating energy equivalent to one of our battlecruisers. Vexithera felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest. Fear. Not the healthy caution of a careful commander, but the deep, cold fear of a predator who suddenly realized he had become prey. His red eyes focused on the largest human ship, a massive black vessel that hung in space like a piece of the void itself. From that ship came a transmission on frequencies the Kitharan fleet had not known humans could access. The face that appeared on Vexithara's screen belonged to a woman with gray hair and steel blue eyes that held no mercy whatsoever. Admiral Vexithera, the woman said, her voice calm and controlled. I am Admiral Sarah Reeves of the Terran Shadow Fleet. Your ultimatum is rejected. Your empire's expansion ends here. You have one opportunity to withdraw from our system peacefully. Vexithera's training kicked in despite his fear. He had conquered 17 worlds. He would not be intimidated by primitives no matter what tricks they might have learned. Human, you may have surprised us, but you are still outnumbered. Our ships are larger than yours. Our weapons have cracked moons in half. Admiral Reeves smiled, and it was the smile of someone who held all the winning cards in a game her opponent had never learned to play. Size isn't everything, Admiral, and our weapons. Her smile grew wider. Well, why don't you see for yourself? The first shot came from the human ship designated Wraith. Captain Maria Santos had been waiting for this moment for 3 years, holding position in the dark between worlds while drilling her crew for a battle they hoped would never come. Now it had come, and they were ready. The weapon that fired from the Wraith was not like anything the Kitharans had ever encountered. It was not plasma or particle beam or nuclear missile. Instead, it was a focused distortion of gravity itself, a weapon that could crush a ship from the inside by creating a tiny black hole that lasted for exactly 3 seconds. The Kitharan, destroyer Pain. Giver simply collapsed. One moment it was a proud vessel of the Empire bristling with weapons and armor. The next moment it was a ball of compressed metal and dying screams that imploded into nothing. The entire destruction took less than 5 seconds. What? Vexithara began. But his words were cut off as more human ships opened fire. The humans did not fight like any enemy the Catharans had faced. Their ships moved in patterns that should have been impossible, turning and accelerating in ways that would have turned any living crew into liquid. They coordinated their attacks with a precision that spoke of decades of training and planning, and their weapons turned proud Catharan warships into debris with terrifying efficiency. Commander Zigtar's voice cracked with panic as he reported what his instruments were telling him. "Sir, their ships are performing maneuvers that exceed safety parameters by impossible margins, and their weapons are using principles our scientists have never seen. That was not an energy beam. It was some kind of gravitational manipulation." Captain Yuki Tanaka, piloting the experimental fighter Phantom, demonstrated the most frightening human innovation of all. Her small ship suddenly vanished from normal space, passing through the shields and armor of the Catharan cruiser world, ender as if they were made of light. She reappeared inside the enemy ship's reactor chamber, where her fighters' special weapons created a cascade failure that tore the massive vessel apart from within. "Phase shift technology operational," Tanaka reported calmly as she shifted back into normal space, watching the Catharan cruiser die around her. "Enemy ship eliminated, moving to next target." Admiral Vexithara watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy he had underestimated so completely that the word mistake seemed inadequate. These were not the primitive humans his scouts had reported. These were apex predators who had been lying in wait, allowing his empire to believe they were weak until the perfect moment to reveal their true nature. "All ships, emergency battle, stations," he commanded. "Maximum firepower. Show these humans the might of the Catharan Empire." The alien fleet opened fire with weapons designed to crack continents. Plasma beams that could melt mountains lanced toward the human ships. Particle cannons that had reduced cities to ash targeted the Shadow Fleet, with the accumulated fury of a dozen conquered worlds. The human ships absorbed the attack with shields that bent and twisted the incoming energy around them like water, flowing around rocks. Not a single human vessel took meaningful damage, while Catharan ships continued to die with each passing minute. Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the battle from her position aboard the research vessel Darwin, monitoring the performance of systems she had spent 20 years perfecting. The adaptive shield technology was working exactly as designed, analyzing incoming attacks and adjusting its properties in real time to neutralize them. "Shield efficiency at 97%, she reported to Admiral Reeves. "Enemy weapons are having virtually no effect. Our countermeasures are operating within acceptable parameters. But the most devastating demonstration of human superiority was yet to come. The Shadow Fleet had been designed not just to win battles, but to end wars." Admiral Reeves gave the order that would show the Catharan Empire exactly what kind of enemy they had chosen to face. "All units execute Protocol 7, maximum psychological impact." Across the human fleet, weapon systems that had never been used in real combat came online. These were not designed to simply destroy enemy ships. They were designed to destroy enemy morale. The Revenant fired a weapon that created a temporary rift in spacetime, causing a Catharan battleship to age 1,000 years in 10 seconds, crumbling to dust as its crew watched in horror. The Nightmare used resonance technology to make an enemy cruiser's hull vibrate at frequencies that drove the alien crew insane before their ship tore itself apart. The Terror simply made an entire Catharan squadron disappear, transporting them to a dimension where they would drift forever in darkness, alive but completely helpless. Commander Zigtar's voice had risen to a terrified shriek as he watched his empire's proud fleet being destroyed by technology that seemed like magic. "Sir, they're not just destroying our ships, they're making them cease to exist. Our sensors show readings that violate every law of physics we know." Admiral Vexithara realized that his choice was simple: retreat or watch his entire fleet be eliminated by an enemy that was so far beyond his understanding that resistance was meaningless. But even retreat might not be possible. The human ships had positioned themselves at every possible escape route, creating a cage of impossible technology around his dying fleet. "Human Admiral," he transmitted, his voice no longer carrying the arrogance of certain victory. We wish to negotiate terms for withdrawal." Admiral Reeves's response was immediate and absolute. "There are no negotiations, Admiral. There are no terms. You came to our system to make us slaves. Now you get to learn what it feels like to be helpless." The last thing Admiral Vexithera saw before his flagship's shields failed was a human fighter phasing through his ship's armor like it was made of air. The last thing he heard was Captain Tanaka's voice, calm and professional, reporting another successful elimination to her fleet. The Battle of Sol was over. The Kitharan Empire had lost its entire invasion fleet in less than an hour. But more importantly, the galaxy had learned that humanity was not the weak, primitive species everyone believed them to be. They were something far more dangerous. They were humans who had been underestimated. The destruction of Admiral Vexithera's fleet was so complete that it took the Kitharan High Council 3 days to believe the reports. 12 mighty dreadnoughts, each one capable of conquering an entire star system, had been reduced to space debris in less than an hour. Worse, they had been destroyed by a species the Empire had dismissed as barely evolved primates, playing with chemical rockets. On the Kitharan homeworld of Vexthal Prime, High Admiral Krakthin called an emergency meeting of the War Council. The ancient chamber had seen the planning of countless victories over the past 1,000 years. Today, it would witness the first discussion of defeat in living memory. "How is this possible?" Krakthin demanded, his forearms gesturing at the holographic display that showed the empty space where Vexthara's fleet had died. "Our reports indicated the humans possessed fewer than 300 primitive vessels. Where did 500 advanced ships come from?" The intelligence coordinator, a thin Kitharan with cybernetic implants covering half his skull, provided the answer that no one wanted to hear. "High Admiral, it appears our intelligence was deliberately deceived. The humans allowed us to observe only what they wanted us to see. While we watched their primitive surface fleet, they were building something else entirely in the darkness between their worlds." Krakthin felt the same cold fear that had consumed Vexthera in his final moments. "You mean they knew we were coming? They prepared for this?" "Not just prepared, High Admiral. They planned it. Analysis of the battle recordings shows coordination and tactical precision that could only come from decades of training. These humans turned our own confidence into a trap." Meanwhile, on Earth, President Chen addressed her people for the second time in a week. But this time, her speech was not about surrender. This time, she revealed the truth that had been hidden for 20 years. "My fellow humans," she began, standing in the same Oval Office where she had announced Earth's fake surrender just days before. "I can now tell you the truth about Project Lazarus and the Shadow Fleet. For 2 decades, while the galaxy saw us as weak and isolated, our greatest minds were preparing for the day when we would need to defend not just our world, but our right to exist as free beings. The revelation shocked the world almost as much as the alien invasion had. People learned that their taxes had funded not just the small fleet everyone could see, but a massive secret armada built with technology that seemed impossible. They learned that thousands of their neighbors, teachers, farmers, mechanics, had actually been highly trained military personnel living under false identities. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Admiral Sarah Reeves appeared on every screen on Earth, wearing a uniform most people had never seen before. Behind her stood the Bridge of the Revenant, its display showing a map of the galaxy that was marked with the locations of every major alien civilization. "Citizens of Earth," Reeves began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. "The destruction of the Kitharan invasion fleet was not the end of our mission. It was the beginning. For too long, the strong have preyed upon the weak throughout this galaxy. That ends now." The Shadow Fleet was already in motion. While the galaxy tried to understand what had happened at Earth, human ships were appearing at strategic locations throughout known space. They moved like ghosts, arriving without warning and departing before anyone could respond. Captain Maria Santos took her ship, the Wraith, to the Zenthari slave markets at Kalos Station. The alien traders who bought and sold sentient beings as property had operated there for centuries, confident that no one could challenge their business. They were wrong. The Wraith appeared directly inside the station's main trading hall, its phase shift technology allowing it to materialize through solid matter. Santos broadcast a simple message to every being on the station. The slave trade ends today. Release your prisoners and leave this system within 1 hour, or face the consequences. The Zenthari traders laughed at what they saw as an empty threat from a single ship. They stopped laughing when Santos demonstrated what human weapons could do. A focused gravity beam collapsed the station's slave pens, but instead of crushing the prisoners inside, it transported them to safety aboard human ships that had been waiting just outside sensor range. The traders themselves were not so fortunate. Those who refused to leave found their ship suddenly aging centuries in seconds, crumbling to dust as they tried to flee. Within an hour, Kalos Station was empty, except for the freed prisoners, and a message burned into its main display. Humanity is watching. Choose your next actions carefully. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The Morphic pirates who had terrorized trade routes for decades found their ships mysteriously losing power and their crews transported to prison colonies they had thought unreachable. The Silicon Court's mechanical beings who saw organic life as inferior discovered that their supposedly invulnerable battle platforms could be shut down by human computer viruses that rewrote their basic programming. Captain Yuki Tanaka led a squadron of phantom fighters to the hegemony systems, where entire species lived under the rule of genetic supremacists who believed DNA determined worth. Her fighters phased through the hegemony's planetary shields and appeared in the middle of their capital cities, broadcasting a message that reached every oppressed being on those worlds. "This is Captain Tanaka of Earth's Shadow Fleet," she announced, as her fighter hovered impossibly in the middle of the main government plaza. "Your rulers have been judged and found wanting. Any being who wishes freedom will be given safe passage to worlds where they can live as equals. Any ruler who attempts to prevent this will answer to us." The hegemony's military tried to stop the evacuation, but their weapons could not hit targets that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their advanced starfighters were reduced to scrap by human technology that violated every law of physics they understood. Within days, millions of beings had been transported to freedom, and the hegemony's power structure had collapsed. But it was Dr. Elena Vasquez who delivered the most devastating message to the galaxy's predators. From her research vessel, Darwin, she broadcast on every communication frequency used by advanced civilizations. Her message was simple and absolute. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chief Science Officer of the Terran Shadow Fleet. To any species that believes strength gives them the right to prey upon others, understand this. We have been watching you. We know where you are, how you operate, and what you fear. We have technology you cannot understand and weapons you cannot defend against." She paused, her tired eyes looking directly into the camera with the intensity of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. "We are not conquerors. We do not want your territory or your resources. We want only one thing: for the strong to stop preying upon the weak. You have one standard galactic year to withdraw from all conquered territories and free all enslaved populations. After that, we will demonstrate why humanity survived long enough to reach the stars." The message spread across the galaxy faster than light, carried by communication networks the aliens had thought were secure. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had lived under oppression for generations heard the words and dared to hope. On the homeworlds of the great predator species, rulers who had never known fear began to understand what their victims had felt for centuries. The Kitharan High Council met an emergency session to decide how to respond to humanity's ultimatum. Some wanted to gather the Empire's full strength and launch a massive assault on the Sol system. Others argued for negotiation, hoping to find some way to appease these terrifying humans. High Admiral Crackton studied the battle recordings one more time, watching human ships perform maneuvers that should have been impossible and use weapons that seemed to bend reality itself. He thought about the 500 ships that had appeared from nowhere, and wondered how many more might be hidden in the darkness between stars. "We withdraw," he announced finally. "Send word to all conquered systems. The Kitharan Empire is pulling back to our core worlds. We will not challenge these humans again." Around the galaxy, Similar conversations were taking place as species that had ruled through force for millennia suddenly found themselves faced with an enemy that could appear anywhere, anytime, and against whom they had no defense. The age of galactic predators was ending. The age of human protection had begun, and in the darkness between stars, more shadow ships were already being built, preparing for the next species that would need to learn why the strong should not prey upon the weak. The galaxy had waited for Earth's surrender. Instead, they got humanity's promise that the innocent would be protected and the guilty would face justice beyond their ability to escape or understand. 6 months after the destruction of the Kithran invasion fleet, the galaxy had learned a new emotion, the fear of human silence. When human ships appeared, oppression ended. When they vanished, peace followed. But the waiting between their visits had become the most terrifying time of all, because no one knew where the Shadow Fleet would strike next. Admiral Sarah Reeves stood in the command center that had been built 5 miles below the Colorado Mountains, watching displays that showed the status of human operations across known space. The room hummed with quiet efficiency as her staff coordinated the activities of a fleet that officially didn't exist, protecting beings on worlds whose names had never appeared in any Earth textbook. Status report, Reeves commanded. Operation Clean Sweep is 93% complete, reported her tactical officer, a woman who had spent 15 years pretending to be a high school math teacher. The hegemony has withdrawn from all conquered systems. The Zenthari have closed their slave markets. The Silicon courts have agreed to recognize organic rights. The Morphic pirates have mostly disbanded. Reeves nodded with satisfaction. The 1-year deadline she had given the galaxy's predators was still 6 months away, but most of them had not waited. The demonstration of human power at Earth had convinced them that resistance was not just futile, but suicidal. But there were still holdouts, species so arrogant or so desperate that they believed they could find a way to fight back against an enemy they could not understand. What about the Draktar Dominion? Reeves asked. Her intelligence officer pulled up a holographic display showing a cluster of red stars near the galaxy's core. They're still refusing to comply, Admiral. High Dominator Vexnal has declared that his species will never bow to inferior mammals, and has begun mobilizing their entire military for a final assault on human space. Reeves studied the display with the calm expression of someone who had seen this pattern before. The Draktar were an ancient species, older than any other spacefaring race, and they had ruled through fear and superior technology for over 10,000 years. Their ships were the size of moons, powered by the energy of enslaved stars, and crewed by beings who had never known defeat. How many ships are we talking about? She asked. Intelligence estimates 4,000 vessels, including their planet killer, dreadnoughts. It would be the largest space fleet ever assembled. For a moment, the command center was silent as everyone contemplated the magnitude of that number. 4,000 ships against humanity's 500. On paper, it looked like humanity was about to face the same impossible odds that had once favored their enemies. But Admiral Reeves smiled, and it was the smile of someone who held cards no one else could see. Contact Dr. Vasquez, she ordered. Tell her it's time to show the galaxy what Project Lazarus was really designed to do. Deep in the research sections of the underground facility, Dr. Elena Vasquez worked on systems that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. For 6 months, she had been refining the technology that had made the Shadow Fleet invisible to their enemies. But invisibility was just the beginning of what human science could accomplish. Admiral, she reported when the call came through, the quantum displacement drives are ready for full-scale deployment. We can now move entire fleets through dimensional space without detection. Travel time between any 2 points in the galaxy is now effectively 0. This was the secret that humanity had kept even from their Shadow Fleet crews. While the galaxy's attention was focused on the impossible weapons and stealth technology the humans had revealed, Earth scientists had been working on something far more revolutionary, the ability to appear anywhere in the galaxy instantly without warning, and in numbers that could overwhelm any defense. Begin Phase 2, Reeves ordered. It's time to deliver our final message to the Draktar Dominion. High Dominator Vexnal stood in the command chamber of his flagship, the Universe Render. watching his armada prepare for the greatest battle in galactic history. His ship was larger than Earth's moon, powered by a captured star that burned in chains in his engine room. Around him, 4,000 vessels prepared to show these upstart humans what real power looked like. "The humans have grown bold," he announced to his officers, his voice echoing through chambers the size of cities. "They believe their tricks and toys make them our equals. Today, they learn the price of challenging a species that ruled the galaxy, when their world was still cooling from its birth." The Draktar fleet began its journey toward human space, moving in a formation that had conquered 1,000 worlds. They expected to face 500 human ships in a final battle that would end with Earth in flames and humanity extinct. They never imagined that the battle would take place in their own system, above their own homeworld. The quantum displacement. Drives activated without warning, and suddenly the sky above the Draktar homeworld was filled with human ships. But these were not the 500 vessels the aliens had expected. Through dimensional rifts that opened like wounds in space itself, ship after ship appeared until the sky was black with their hulls. High Dominator Vexenal watched in disbelief as his instruments counted the impossible numbers. 1,000 human ships, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000. The count kept climbing until his sensors simply gave up and displayed incalculable. Admiral Reeves broadcast to every being in the Draktar system, her voice reaching not just the military vessels, but every civilian, every slave, every living creature under the Dominion's rule. "High Dominator Vexenal," she began, her words calm and precise. "You declared that your species would never bow to inferior mammals. You mobilized your entire military to destroy humanity. You made a mistake. Above the Draktar homeworld, human ships continued to appear until they formed a sphere around the entire planet. Each ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, equipped with weapons that could reshape matter at the subatomic level, and defenses that bent the laws of physics to their will. The shadow fleet you encountered at Earth was our advanced scout force," Reeves continued. "A tiny fraction of what humanity has built while the galaxy thought we were primitive. You wanted to see our full strength. Congratulations. You're looking at it." The numbers were staggering. 50,000 human ships surrounded the Draktar homeworld, each one more advanced than anything the ancient species had ever built. It was a demonstration of industrial capacity and technological superiority that rewrote everything the galaxy thought it knew about human civilization. Captain Maria Santos, commanding a new vessel called the Retribution, opened communications with the Draktar fleet that was still en route to attack Earth. "This is Captain Santos of the Terran Defense Force. Your homeworld is now under our protection. All Draktar military vessels will return to base immediately and prepare for inspection. Any ship that fires a weapon or refuses to comply will be disabled." High Dominator Vexenal tried to rally his forces, but the mathematics of the situation were unavoidable. Even if every shot his fleet fired destroyed a human ship, they would still be outnumbered 100 to 1. And the humans had already proven that their ships were not so easily destroyed. "This is impossible," he whispered, staring at the display that showed his proud homeworld surrounded by more enemy vessels than had ever existed in the galaxy's recorded history. How did a species that discovered spaceflight only centuries ago build such a fleet? Dr. Vasquez answered that question in a broadcast that reached every world in known space. "We built this fleet the same way we survived long enough to reach the stars," she said, her image appearing on communication systems across the galaxy. "We planned, we prepared, we worked together, and most importantly, we never stopped believing that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak." The Draktar surrender came within hours. Faced with impossible odds and technology they could not hope to match, even the proudest species in the galaxy chose survival over extinction. Their planet-killer dreadnoughts powered down their weapons. Their enslaved populations were freed. Their 10,000-year reign of terror ended with a whimper, not a roar. But the real message was not sent to the Draktar. It was sent to every other species in the galaxy that still harbored thoughts of conquest or oppression. The message was simple and absolute. Humanity was not just protecting Earth anymore. They were protecting everyone. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change in ways that no one had thought possible. Trade routes that had been plagued by pirates for centuries became safe. Slave markets that had operated for millennia closed their doors forever. Species that had lived in fear for generations began to explore and grow and dream of futures their grandparents could never have imagined. And in the darkness between stars, more human ships continued their silent patrol, watching and waiting and protecting. They were the shadow that fell across tyranny, the ghost that haunted the dreams of predators, the promise that the innocent would never again face extinction alone. The galaxy had learned to fear Earth's silence, because that silence meant humanity was watching. And when humanity watched, justice followed with weapons that could reshape reality itself, and a determination that had carried them from caves to stars. The age of predators was over.